turns out that the heart itself has a nervous system. In the pericardium, which is the fibrous membrane that surrounds the heart, there's a network of nerves which have predictive capacities. So when people say, especially for negative things, so when you say, oh, I knew it in my heart, you did. And that brain in the heart is connected to the brain up here. So that's yet another kind of connection. So then naturally, whatever happens emotionally and how we live our lives has a huge impact on our physiology, because these systems are not separate, they're just one system. So let's look at the question of how the repression of anger then might suppress our immune system, okay? So I'll ask for a volunteer here, and whoever volunteers, I can promise you two things. One is that you might feel uncomfortable for a minute, and the other is that you learn something about yourself, okay? So, any volunteers? You know, thanks, right there. No, you don't have to do it, just stay where you are. Here, what's your name? Lorraine. Lorraine? Well, thanks for volunteering. Here are the rules, okay? This is a metaphor or a representation of your life. You sitting in that chair. Therefore, you can't leave the chair, okay? So whatever happens, you're going to have to stay exactly where you are. Other than that, you can do whatever you need to. You got it? Okay. So, Lorraine, what I'm going to ask you is, if you're okay with me standing right here as I give the lecture. Is this comfortable for you? Okay. So, I'm going to come closer now and ask you if it's still okay. If I give the lecture here, is that still okay with you? Yes. It's fine. No. What about if I stood right here and gave the rest of the lecture right here? How would that be for you?
It would be a little uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. So what would you like to do about it?
For you to step back.
You'd like me to step back, and okay, how are you going to get that?
Asking you.
You're going to ask me, okay. You can ask, and I'm going to say heck with you and come a bit closer, okay? No,
push you away.
No, okay, now you'd push me away. Now you'd push me away, right? You'd push me away.
Yes.
Okay, very good. As you were pushing, what emotion do you think you'd be generating?
My guts were just going like this, and I was feeling really smothered.
That's why you pushed me away, but as you were pushing, what do you think you'd be feeling?
I felt.
Not what you felt, but what you would feel if you were actually pushing me. What's the emotion do you think that'd be there for you?
I think that would be like, I don't know, a little bit of anger and a little bit of.
Exactly. Anger. And that's a healthy anger. Now, healthy anger is nothing but a defense of your boundaries. And basically, Lorraine, what you'd be saying to me is, you're in my space, get out. You're in my space, get out. Now, if you said that in the first place, you would need to be pushing me, right? But the pushing itself, it's good. It's a good response. It's a healthy response. So, in other words, healthy anger is an expression of a boundary defense. So the job of our emotions. Now, by the way, if I was somebody else in your life, I mean somebody that we had a different relationship with, you might welcome them coming close to you, right? No, I don't mean me. I mean your child or your partner or whoever, or somebody. You might actually embrace them, right, in a different situation. So the role of emotions, basically, is to respond to, approach, and welcome the healthy and positive approach, and to keep out the unhealthy and aggressive one. So it's either I want more of this or I want less of this. So that's the job of healthy anger. That's the job of the emotions. In other words, it's to let in what's healthy and nourishing and to keep out what's dangerous and unwelcome. That's the job of emotions, basically. Now, what is the job of the immune system?
Fight off bacteria.
Yeah, so basically, the job of the immune system is to keep out what's unhealthy, like bacteria, or to kill cancer cells. That's what it does. Or to let in what's healthy, like vitamins and nourishments and so on. If your immune system attacked the particles of food and destroyed them before you had a chance to absorb them, you wouldn't live. So that the job of the immune system is like that. It's been called the floating brain because it has recognition capacity, reactive capacity, and learning capacity. So it's the same as the emotions. The immune system does the same thing as the emotions. Protect us and let in what we need. Given the unity of all these systems, it's obvious that when you suppress the one, you're suppressing the other. And that's why people that suppress anger, they have diminished activity of their immune system, as has been shown in studies. Or what happens is that the immune system gets so confused because our emotions are confused that it turns against ourselves. And that's when you get autoimmune disease, when the immune system actually attacks the body itself. Fundamentally what happens is, one way or the other, if you don't know how to say no when you need to, your body will say it for you in the form of illness. So chronic illness represents the body saying no when you didn't do it. Not your fault. This is how you were programmed before you had any choice in the matter. So again, it's not a question of blame or self-blame. But it does mean that to prevent illness, or if you have an illness, to deal with it more effectively, you need to learn to assert who you are and to say no. Now that might be difficult sometimes because the people in your life have got used to you as a yes. They've always heard you say yes. Some of them might not like you very much if you start saying no all of a sudden. And what you're going to do when you start saying no is you're going to find out who your friends are. Because the real ones are going to say to you, hey, I'm so glad you're finally saying no. And the ones that were simply there because you were constantly available for them are going to, oh, what happened to her or him? You know? That's it. But so it'll create some conflict which will trigger all your fears about attachment. So you're going to have to learn that you are more important than your attachments. That wasn't true when you were a kid, but it's true as an adult. I'm going to finish with one story, and then we'll take questions and do a couple of little exercises for you. Gilda Radner, you might remember her as a comedian on Saturday Night Live. And she died of ovarian cancer. And I didn't know anything about her life, but I read her biography because I knew she died of cancer. And guess what? It's the same story over again. So Gilda Radner was a very unhappy child, and she was overweight as a child. And she was thin as an adult because she was bulimic. So all the time that she was a star, she was actually a bulimic. Typically, she didn't tell her mother. Her mother didn't know that she was bulimic until after she had died. Why? Because she was still protecting her mother. Just like I was with suppressing my limp. Her father died when she was 12, a loss she never overcame, and so what she did, she always got into relationships with men where she would suppress herself to fit the image that the man had that he wanted of her. And the only way she could feel close to her mother was to make her laugh. So guess what? She becomes a comedian. So many comedians, by the way, are very troubled people. And guess what? I have a son who wants to be a comedian. For good reason. And then she develops ovarian cancer. Even after her symptoms of ovarian cancer began to cause physical distress, including bowel blockage, Radner was more concerned with satisfying others than with her own needs. She sought and received advice from sundry sources. Her dilemma, she writes in her autobiography, suddenly I began to wonder how to please so many people. Do I take magnesium citrate? What about the coffee enema? Do I do both? Do I do the abdominal massage or the colonic? Do I tell the doctors about each other? East meets West in Gilda's body. Western medicine down my throat, Eastern medicine up my butt. When it seemed she had been successfully treated, Gilda became a poster girl for ovarian cancer, featured on the cover of Life magazine. She was an inspiration to many, but the recovery was short-lived. Still attached to roles she had developed as a child, she berated herself for having, quote, let down others by developing terminal illness. I had become a spokeswoman for the wellness community and a symbol of getting well. I had been a model cancer patient, completely active in my own therapy. Now I felt like a living example that didn't work. I'm just a fraud, I thought. Only close to her death did Gilda finally learn that she could not be mother to the world. I couldn't do everything I wanted to do. I couldn't keep calling all the cancer patients I knew. And I couldn't try to help all the women with ovarian cancer. And I couldn't read every letter I received because it was ripping me apart. I couldn't cry all those tears for everybody else. I had to take care of myself. It is important to realize that you have to take care of yourself because you can't take care of anybody else until you do. Well, the trouble is you can, but if you don't take care of yourself in the process, you're going to make yourself ill. So the issue, of course, is not that we shouldn't provide care to other people. I mean, caring for others and being kind, that's wired into us as human beings. That's a true expression of who we are. But going along with that, there has to be self-care. That means that you must demand support. If you're caring for others, you must demand support when you need it. You must be able to have a break. You must be able to ask for help when you need it. You must be able to express how you feel. You must take time for yourself. There must be times in your life which is just for you. So that we have to find ways, amidst the role of caregivers, to actually care for the person here. Because if we don't, the result is burnout and illness. So again, it's not a question of being selfish and unconcerned. That's not so good either for your health. But it's a question of being as kind to yourself as you are wanting to be to others. It's kind of the golden rule turned around, you know. Do unto you, not just do unto others what you would have them do to you, but also do unto yourself what you wish to do to others. Any questions on what I've said? Yes, please.
When you were talking about how you have you're trying to hide yourself
Yeah.
and trying to pull back, is that also a time that we tend to go to addictions too?
Well, addictions is something a bit different. Addiction happens when we're stressed and we need to soothe ourselves. So when we allow all the stress to wash over us and we don't keep the stress away, then we get overwhelmed. Then one way to deal with the stress is to become addicted. So that it's very interesting when you look at families with addictions, you also see a lot of illness in other members. So they just represent different coping styles. The addict soothes themselves through the addictive behavior. The person who doesn't go to addiction, they're going to go suppress themselves and develop illness instead. So there's a group of studies called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Studies. They look at children, or they look at adults, and if they had physical, sexual, emotional abuse, or death of a parent, or some other catastrophic event in their lives, the more of these events there were, the more likely they become addicted as adults, and the more likely they have autoimmune disease or cancer. So when people stop soothing themselves with the alcohol, but they're not dealing with the stresses, then, as you say, they're not dealing with the emotional stuff, then the illness will show up. That would not be, not to mention that alcohol itself promotes a certain kind of cancer. Bulimia is a form of addiction, and it arises for the same reasons that addiction arises.
It's like a self-soothing.
What's that?
Is it self-soothing? What is it?
You know what it is? It's a buildup of tension and an urgent release. So that it's a way of actually self-created, it's a way of releasing tension. And there's that relief. So the addiction, I define as any behavior that you crave that has a sense of relief associated with it, and which has negative consequences, and you don't give it up despite the negative consequences. That's what addiction is. Bulimia is an addiction. The best way to understand it is a form of addiction. And the causes of it go back to exactly the same factors that would underlie addiction. See, there's only one story. There's only one story. You treat kids well, they grow up to be healthy adults. You don't treat them well, they're going to act out their unwellness in a number of ways. And all the illnesses that we have, and all these diagnoses are just different forms of people manifesting early trauma and early distress. That's all. It's very simple. Anorexia is an attempt to be in control of something. When you don't feel your life is in control, that's one way to be in control, because that's something nobody can control you with. So you're going to be totally in charge. It's an emotional, or it's an attempt to deal with severe emotional loss that leaves you completely helpless. But in this one area of your life, you're totally in charge. That's how I understand it. And invariably, it has to do with relationships with caregivers, particularly mothers. I don't blame mothers, because the mothers are just acting out what happened to them as kids. But these kids with anorexia, there's always issues. And, I know that, like the singer Anne Murray, I think her daughter was an anorexic. And what I read about them, it is a self-suppression on the part of the daughter. I think there's a lot of anger there that's being suppressed in anorexia. And that anger is being taken out on the self. That's how I understand. Stress is not just what happens to us, it's how we process it. What you should have had to have been able to do was to scream and yell as soon as anybody touched you the wrong way. That's what you should have been able to do too, is just to scream and run and ask for help. The fact that you didn't is not your fault. By the time you were 4 and by the time you were 11, you had already learned that you were alone in the world. And that there's nobody there to listen to you. So it's not that you made a mistake, you just simply did what any child would, which is to assess the situation unconsciously, and you already knew that nobody there was there to support you. And there, when there's no support there, then you can't express how you feel. It's that suppression of feeling and the non-expression of the stress response that actually creates the long-term chronic stress. How many of you know what it takes to have a really good life? I mean, in terms of nutrition and exercise and emotional balance and all that. How many of you know what it takes? How many of you are living it? Okay? So first of all, thank you. First of all, the person you're talking about is not that unique, are they? They're just like the rest of us. So what I would say to that person is, you know what? Listen to them. What are they saying to you? They're saying that they're discouraged. So just hear instead of talking them out of it, listen to them. You sound really discouraged. Wonder what that's about for you. You must feel really hopeless sometimes. You know what? Even me, I know how to live a good life, but I don't do it. It's just very hard. Really listen to them. Make sure that they feel validated and understood by you. Then they can get past it. If you try to talk them out of it, you can't. Well, let me tell you about a friend of mine who lives in Calgary. Her name is Shannon Duke. And Shannon is 48 years old now. And when she was 37, she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. The stage 4 meant that the cancer was already in her bones by the time it was diagnosed. At that time, she had 2 young children, aged 1 and 3, and married to a well-to-do businessman. She herself was a very high-functioning executive for Microsoft in Calgary. And then she's diagnosed. She had the perfect life, perfect marriage, perfect home, of course. And then she's diagnosed. And healthy, physically, fit. Always ate well. And then she's diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And she has a transformation. Now, she gets the best medical advice she can get anywhere in North America, and she traveled to New York and elsewhere. And she got the best medical treatment, and with that, she was given 1 year to live, because that's the prognosis. Stage 4, despite the medical treatment, chances are you'll be dead in 1 year. Now, a year ago in February, just a year ago now, Shannon traveled to the Napa Valley of California with some of her friends, and they celebrated her 10th year survival and her 47th birthday. And the transformation that she experienced was that when she was diagnosed and started paying attention, she realized that her life had not been her life, because she was sexually abused as a child. And her response to the abuse was, of course, as many children will experience, it can't be about the adults, it's about me. So if this terrible thing happened to me, I must be a very bad person. So I have to be very good to compensate. So you're the good daughter who doesn't talk about it, doesn't disturb the waters, the good employee, the good student, the good wife who doesn't talk about the husband's addiction issues, because that would again disturb the waters. And when she's diagnosed and she decides she wants to live, she says, the hell with all this perfection and goodness. And she confronts her family of origin about the abuse that she had endured, and she confronts her husband. And she starts living authentic. And she leaves the job, by the way, which wasn't her. Wasn't really expressing who she was. Now, 11 years later, the cancer is still in her bones, but it's completely inactive. But she knows that if she wants to stay alive, she needs to stay authentic. So that I believe that many of these issues are reversible. I'm not promising a cure here to anybody, but Shannon really underwent a major self-journey. And she continues every day to work at it, and she practices her spiritual ways, which she ignored all those years, and she pays attention to herself, and she keeps clearing this stuff out, and she is the picture of health. Her and I give workshops together sometime. So that there's ways to get there, but it's a commitment. And of course, it might threaten the attachment relationships. So that's always your call.